We continue now at the top of Daf Amud Aleph in Mesechet Yevamos. This is Yevamos Daf 84a. The Gemara here is continuing a brisa which is bringing Rabbi Eliezer's opinion, similar to the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer that we brought in the previous Amud. The brisa says, HaKilayim utreifa. Let's say you have an animal that's kilayim, or you have an animal that's a treifa. All of these things are going to have in common that they cannot be brought as a carbon. V'yotzei dofen. Let's say you have an animal that's yotzei dofen, meaning to say it was born by C-section. Tumtum ve'androgonus. Let's say you have an animal that's either a tumtum or an androgonus. Lo kedoshin v'lo mekachin. They don't become holy as karbanos. We'll see in a moment what the difference is between kedoshin and mekachin. But the point over here is that clearly the brisa is saying, Rabbi Eliezer is saying, that the androgonus is not considered to be a full-fledged zochar, and that's why it cannot be brought as a carbon. V'yamar Shmuel, and Shmuel says, Lo kedoshin b'tmura v'lo mekachin ba'osa tmura. It doesn't become holy in terms of tmura, and it doesn't make things holy in terms of tmura. Shma Amina, and you see from this, again, that androgonus is not considered a zochar in this regard. And Rashi over here explains, Kilayim pasal la'akrav. If you have an animal that's kilayim, that's pasal as a carbon. T'chsiv shoro kesef prat l'kilayim, ki yivoled prat liyotzei dofen. So shoro kesef excludes kilayim, and ki yivoled has to be born the normal fashion, not a yotzei dofen, not like a C-section. V'hani chamisha yolef Rabbi Eliezer mikroi b'tmura. These 5 cases over here are learned from Sukkim by Rabbi Eliezer in Mesechet Tmura, Perek Yesh b'karbanos, d'lachayel kedusha alein, that there's no kedusha. V'yafagav d'shar psule hakrova kegon roveya v'nirba muksa v'nevad v'eslan u'mechir. Now, even though other kinds of cases which are possible to bring as karbanos, and all of these cases over here, chayla alayo kedushas haguf, still the kedusha still chal on the animal. Utzrichin mum kavua lipadas olav, and then you need to wait for the animal to develop a permanent blemish in order to redeem on it. Ulachar pidyon asurin begiz of avoda. Then after you do the redemption, it's still prohibited begiz of avoda. You can't shear it, you can't work it. But these animals lo chayli alayu elo kedushas damim. Over here, the only kind of kedusha that's going to be chal is kedusha in terms of whatever their value is. Kedikla bialma v'niftin below mum umutarn begiz of avoda lachar pidyonin. It would just be like making anything, any normal object, making it kadosh. It's just kadosh for damim. It's not like an animal which has what we call kadshe mizbeach, kedushas haguf. And so over here, you can redeem it. You don't have to wait for a mum. It's mutter begiz of avoda after it's redeemed. So again, it's a different level in terms of the kedusha that it can have. And then it said lo kedoshin b'tmura, means to say lo miboy tchilas hekdesh. Rashi says for sure you can't make it a carbon from the outset. That's obvious. The lo kadshi da'afilu bal mum shekidesh mumo lehekdesho lo nochtale kedushas haguf. Even in a situation where you have, let's say, a bal mum shekada mumo lehekdesho, that the mum came before the hekdesh, the kedushas haguf is not chal. Kedo amar bebechoros perek beis. That's what it says in bechoros. Ela afilu emheimir kodesh bohen. But even if you did a kind of tmura hekdesh with them, hani lo mekach. If you use these animals, it's not going to be holy. The ilu bal mum chaylo aleo kedushas haguf. Because if you had an animal that was a bal mum, there would be some kedusha in such a case. Like aser begiza v'avoda, it would be aser in giza v'avoda. Af mishayivta, even after redemption, dechsiv tov bara im hamer yimirenu afilu hachi ahani lo chayla. That's what it means over here. Even temura is not going to work. V'ein makdish lasos tmura means imheim kedoshim v'heimer chulin bohem. So the first case, when it says kedoshim b'tmura, means let's say you had an animal that was already a carbon, and you tried to take that kedusha and put it on this animal. You say whatever that this animal has, I want to put it on the following animal. That won't work. And then when it says mekachin, which we said means ba'osa tmura, that means to say, let's say this animal is holy, and you're trying to do tmura of chulin from such an animal, einon osin tmura. It's not going to create tmura. And Rashi says over here, over there they ask the following question. That second statement makes no sense, because if you couldn't make it a carbon in the first place, how would you then take the kedusha from the animal and put it somewhere else? If again, all of these animals can never have the kedusha. So Gemara gives a simple answer. Case could be, let's say you made it holy first, and then it became a treifa. Or b'makdish vlad v'yatza derech dofen. Again, you were makdish of vlad, and then it came out through a C-section. Avol kilayim v'tumtum v'androgonus. But these other cases of kilayim, tumtum, and androgonus, shenivselu mishas yitzirasim, that's already from the time of creation that they have those conditions. Iyata motze sheyakdish ela b'vlados kachim shaysa imon kedusha. Then you could come up only with a case, let's say the mother was already holy. Umatakanosum yiru v'yastav, where the only solution would be to let it graze until it develops a mum v'yiftem v'yochlem v'atrefa tikaver. Again, you redeem it, you could eat it. it. The treifa you're going to have to bury. In any case, the point is, though, you do see from here that when it comes to the androgynous, it's not treated like a full-fledged zachar, and it doesn't get this kedushas mizbeach, this kedushas aguf. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said, Rabbi Eliezer says, chayavin olav skila kazachar, when it comes to an androgynous, if the person, the androgynous, has relations with a male, so then there's going to be a chi of skila, just like if a male would have relations with a male. And the Gemara says, Tanya, we learned in a brayso, so Amar Rebbe says, Kishalachti lilmo Torah etzel Rabbi Eliezer ben Shamua. When I went to learn Torah by Rabbi Eliezer ben Shamua, chavru alai talmidov, his students, they all ganged up on me. Ketarnagolim shel beis bukya, like the roosters of beis bukya. Rashi over here says, shel beis bukya bekiyim v'charifim ve'manichin tarnagol nachri benem. These are very aggressive animals. They don't let any strange animals that they don't know among them. So the same thing over there, they kind of drove Rebbe out. V'lo hinichuni lilmo, they didn't even allow me to learn eladavar echad b'mishnah seinu, except for one thing in our Mishnah. When I went over there, I was able to learn one thing, and that's the teaching that we have in our Mishnah. Rabbi Eliezer says, androgynous chayav and olav skila kazachar. When it comes to an androgynous, there's a chi of skila just like a regular male. Hadron alacha arel, we will return to you. Parak ha'arel, that is the end of the 8th parak of Mesechet Yevamos. If you're enjoying these videos and this channel, please like, share, and subscribe, and please take a look at the description box below to see how you can support this channel. And we will now begin the 9th parak of Mesechet Yevamos. And the Mishnah says, Yesh mutaros lebaalei, and there are some women that they are mutar to their husbands, the asuros liv mehen, but they're asur to their brother-in-laws. You can have the other way around, mutaros liv mehen, some women are mutar to the brother-in-laws, the asuros lebaalei, but they're asur to their husbands. And you can also have mutaros laelu ulaelu, you can have women that are mutar to both, the asuros laelu vilaelu, and you can have women that are asur to both. And the Mishnah now explains, Ve'elu mutaros lebaalei and v'asuros liv mehen. The following women are mutar to their husbands, but they're asur to their brother-in-laws. Let's say you have a case of a Kohen Hedyot Shenasa Esva Almana. Let's say a regular Kohen marries an Almana. That's a perfectly permissible marriage. V'yesh lo ach Kohen Gadol, but he has a brother that's a Kohen Gadol, and a Kohen Gadol is not allowed to marry an Almana, so that's asur to the brother-in-law. Or you can have the following case, Cholol Shenasa Ksheira. Let's say you have a Cholol, and he marries a Ksheira. There's nothing wrong with the Cholol getting married. V'yesh lo ach Kosher, and he has a brother who's also going to be a Kosher. So in that case, what ends up happening, though, is that the Cholol, he makes the Ksheira into a Chalola. Now, if he makes the Ksheira into a Chalola, and now he has a brother who's also a Kohen, so that's why the brother-in-law is going to be Asr, but the original marriage is going to be Mutter. Yisrael Shanasa Bas Yisrael. Let's say you have a Yisrael who marries a Bas Yisrael, V'yesh lo ach mamzer, and he has a brother that's a mamzer. So there, again, the marriage is going to be permitted, but the brother-in-law is going to be a problem because he's a mamzer. Mamzer Shanasa Mamzeres. Let's say you have a mamzer that marries a mamzeres, that's a permitted relationship. V'yesh lo ach Yisrael, he has a brother that's a Yisrael. That's also going to be a problem for the brother-in-law. And so the Mishnah says, in all of these cases, mutaras lebaalei and vasuras liivmei, and they're mutar again to their husbands, and they're also to their brother-in-laws. And the Mishnah continues, ve'elu mutaras liivmei and vasuras lebaalei. And the following cases are mutar to the brother-in-laws, but also to their husbands. Kohen Gadol shekidesh es almana. Let's say a Kohen Gadol betroths an almana. V'yesh lo ach Kohen Hedyot, and he has a brother that's a Kohen Hedyot. Specifically talking about betrothing the almana, not having relations with her, because if there's relations already, then it's going to make her into, then it's going to passel her, it's going to disqualify her for a kahuna. But if it was just a betrothal, so then again the Kohen Gadol is not allowed with the almana, but the almana would be okay with the brother that's a regular Kohen. Kosher shenasa chalala. Let's say you have a situation of a kosher who marries a chalala. V'yesh lo ach chalal, and he has a brother that's a chalal. A chalal is allowed to marry a chalala, but the kosher is problematic for him to marry the chalala, and so therefore that would be a similar kind of case. Yisrael shenasa mamzeres. Let's say you have a Yisrael that marries a mamzeres. V'yesh lo ach mamzer. So again, the marriage is a problem, but the brother-in-law would be okay because he's a mamzer. Or mamzer shenasa bas Yisrael. Let's say you have a mamzer that marries a bas Yisrael, a regular Jewish girl. V'yesh lo ach Yisrael, and then he has a brother who's a Yisrael. So again, the bas Yisrael is going to be mutter to the ach Yisrael, to the brother-in-law, but not to her husband who is a mamzer. And the Mishnah says in all these cases, again, mutaras liivmein, the asuras lebaalei, and they're mutter to their brother-in-laws, but they are asur to their husbands. Ve'elu asuras la'elu v'lo'elu. In the following cases, they're asur to both. Kohen Gadol shenasa es almana. Let's say a Kohen Gadol marries an almana. V'yesh lo ach Kohen Gadol, and he has a brother who's also a Kohen Gadol. O Kohen Hedyot kosher shenasa chalala. Let's say you have a Kohen Hedyot who's a kosher who marries a chalala. It's a v'yesh lo ach kosher, and he has a brother who is a kosher. So in that case, again, it's going to be asur to both. The Kohen Hedyot kosher, Kohen's not allowed to marry the chalala, and his brother also is a Kohen, is not allowed to marry the chalala. Yisrael shenasa mamzeres. Let's say Yisrael marries a mamzeres. V'yesh lo ach Yisrael, he has a brother to Yisrael. They're both not allowed to marry the mamzeres. Mamzer shenasa bas Yisrael. V'yesh lo ach mamzer. Let's say a mamzer marries a bas Yisrael. His brother's also a mamzer. In all of these cases, asuros la'elo v'la'elo is going to be usher to both the husband and the brother-in-law. Ushar kol anoshim mutaros lebalein v'liyavmein. All other women are going to be mutter to both their husbands and their brother-in-laws. And the Mishnah continues, Shnios midivrei sofrim. Let's say you have a relationship of shnios, meaning to say it's arayos, but only on a derabanan level. So shnio lebal velo shnio liyavam. Let's say you have a case where she's not permitted to the husband. She's a shnia, meaning she's a kind of relative that's prohibited midirabanan to the husband, but not to the brother-in-law. So then again, asura lebal umuteres liyavam. She'll be usher to the husband, but mutter to the yavam. Shnio liyavam velo shnio lebal. Let's say she's a shnia to the yavam, but not to the baal. Then the other way around, asura liyavam umuteres lebal. She'll be asura, prohibited to the yavam, and she'll be mutter to her husband. Shniya lazev lazeh. Let's say she's a shniya relationship to both of them. So asura lazev lazeh. She's going to be usher to both of them. And the Mishnah says, if you have a situation of a marriage of shnios midivrei sofrim, ein lo ksuba. She's not going to be entitled to ksuba. Velo peiros and not peiros. Rashi will explain that. Velo mezonos, and she's not entitled to mezonos, to sustenance. Velo beloos. She's not entitled to the worn out clothing. Also, Rashi will explain. V'havlad kosher. But the child in these cases is still going to be a kosher. V'kofin oso lahotzi. In all these cases, we do force him to separate from her, to divorce her. Almana lekohen gadol, grusha v'chalutza lekohen hedyot. Let's say you have an almana that marries a kohen gadol, or a grusha and chalutza marries a kohen hedyot. These are prohibited relationships. Mamzeres unesina liyisrael. Let's say a mamzeres or a nesina marries a yisrael, or bas yisrael unesina lamamzer, or the other way around, a bas yisrael marries a nesina or a mamzer. All these prohibited relationships. But in all of these cases, yesh len ksuba, still the women do receive a ksuba. And Rashi over here explains kohen hedyot shenosas almana. The case in the Mishnah was, let's say a kohen hedyot, so he marries an almana, but he has a brother that's a kohen gadol, so it's a good marriage, but not good with the brother-in-law. Rashi points out, hu adin lebesula. The same would actually be true, even if she wasn't an almana. It was a regular besula. The cheshames, because when he dies, nasas almana, she'll still become an almana. V'asur lekohen gadol achiv. So still she's also to the kohen gadol. So what do you have to give a case over here where it's a kohen hedyot that marries the almana? She'll just become an almana when he dies. With a gemara parach lisni besula, the gemara is going to ask that question and say, why not just have a kohen hedyot that marries a besula? And then again, his brother is the kohen gadol. It's the same problem. Ach kosher. Then we had a case. Let's say he has a brother who's a kosher kohen. So the case over here was, you had a situation where the first person he married this kosher woman, a cholo married a kosher woman, and then he has a brother that's a kohen. So asur liyavma, he's not allowed to do even with her, because she was a kosher woman, but she married a cholo, so she actually becomes a chalola. Now a cholo can marry a ksher. There's no problem with that original marriage, like we said in the Mishnah, but with the brother-in-law, it's going to be a problem. Shakidesh, then the Mishnah had a case where there was only a betrothal. The case over there was specifically a betrothal, like we said in the Mishnah, because again, if it would be a marriage, so then with the relations, she becomes a chalala v'asur liyevama hedyot. She would then be asur to the yevama if he is a kohen hedyot. Shniya lebal v'lo shniya liyavam. Then we had the cases of these secondary relationships in terms of blood relatives, and it's only asur midrabanan. So you can have a case where she's a shniya to the husband, but not to the brother-in-law. How could that be? As follows, Rashi says, Aim imo shel bal. Let's say she is the mother of her husband. So in that case, the husband is marrying his grandmother, his maternal grandmother. Velo shel yavam, but she is not the aim imo of the yavam. Kagon shel achim b'nav velo menaim. Very simply, the two of them were brothers through the father's side, but not through the mother's side. That's how you can have a case of shniya lebal velo shniya liyavam. So then it said in all these cases of shnios, there are a bunch of items that the woman is not entitled to. So one of the things was she doesn't have ksuba. The next thing on the list was she doesn't get peiros. What does that mean? V'lo peiros ein mishalim lepeiros nichse melug she'achal mishala. Rashi understands that to mean that, let's say he ate the peiros of the nichse melug, so he doesn't have to pay her those fruits of the nichse melug that he consumed. V'yavagav dekaimelon b'chsubas tiknu pirkona tachas peiros nichse melug. Now the problem here is a husband never has to pay back the fruits of the nichse melug. That's the whole point of the nichse melug. The whole point is that the husband gets to eat the peiros. So what does that mean? So Rashi now explains, because in Ksubas it says that the thing that she gets in exchange for the Peros Nechse Melug is that he has to redeem her. Let's say she gets captured. Let's say she's in captivity. Shewochel, that's in lieu, or instead of the Peros Nechse Melug, as a repayment, he owes her Perkona, her freedom. Kedetanan lo kosav lo, and that's what we learn in the Mishnah. In this particular case, they don't write into the Ksuba, De'im tishtaboy afrikinach, that if you get captured, then I will redeem you. Chayev lifdosa shu tanai bezin. It's normally a condition of bezin that's one of the obligations of the husband. Vizu ein chayev lifdosa. Now, in this case, that's what the Mishnah is saying. He doesn't have to redeem her into because it's not a situation where really he's supposed to be marrying her. This is a relationship where we want them to separate. Afilu hachi, because the whole point is that when he redeems her, he's going to take her back as a wife. But here, you don't even want that to happen, so therefore there's no redemption. Afilu hachi lo yishalim lapeira shachal mishalon. Now, even though he's not redeeming her, so now you might think, well, if that's the case, so he shouldn't get the peiros. That's what the Mishnah is saying. No, if he takes the peiros, he doesn't have to pay her back. But Gemara is explaining the Gemara, Tanai ksuba k'chsuva dami, the conditions of the ksuba are the same as the ksuba. V'chiyechi the kansur rabbanan delo gavya minei ksubas nichseit tzon barzel. So therefore, just like there's a fine, the rabbanan say that she's not allowed to collect the ksuba of the nechseit tzon barzel, shechnisa lo mishalah. The nechseit tzon barzel are the ones that they stay fixed in terms of the value. She always gets back the same exact value that they were when they came into the marriage. So that also there's a fine. She doesn't get that because these relationships are not allowed. Shechnisa lo mishalah b'toras ksuba kansua nami delo tigva minei peiros shachal b'tanai ksuba shel perkona. We also say she doesn't get to collect any money in lieu of the peiros that he took because normally that's again for him freeing her. Shu tanai bezin shein kasav b'shtar ksuba. There's a Tanai Bezin's not written in the shtar ksuba. She's not entitled to that. V'lo mizonos. Now also she doesn't get mizonos. And Rashi says for that, Lomi boy hecha di yasava to say delo chayfin lezona. Obviously, while they're married, we're not going to force him to sustain her. Because the whole point is we want them to divorce. Why would we tell him to support her if we're trying to get them separated? What we mean to say is, even if he went far away and now she borrowed money in order to be able to have food, he does not have to pay back. And Rashi over here continues below. She's also not entitled to the worn-out clothing. Means to say, Madayim yeshla below so shchakim min begadim shechnislo. According to Rashi, the idea is, let's say there are still some clothing that she brought into the marriage. They're now worn out. Eino not lost, and she can't take those back. Keshayotza, when she leaves the marriage, the kansur rabbanon. Again, that is a fine from the rabbanon because this is a marriage that was really not permitted by the rabbanon. And the Gemara says, Ma'irya detani nasa lisni kidesh. Why is it that in the first case of the Mishnah over there, it talks about a Kohen Hedyot who marries an Almana, and he has a brother that's a Kohen Gadol. Why have that he marries the Almana? Just make it that he betrothed the Almana. It's going to be exactly the same. She's still an Almana, and she's still prohibited to the Kohen Gadol. And the Gemara says, maybe you're going to say, no, it's specifically because he married her, because now, let's say she was an Almana from an Erusin, and so therefore she was a Basula. So by marrying her, he creates an additional problem that not only is she an Almana, she is also going to not be a Basula, to have a Aseh Velos Aseh, because now you have a combination of both an Aseh and a Los Aseh, because there's an Aseh that a Kohen Gadol is supposed to marry a Basula and not a Be'ula, and maybe it's specifically over there that's a problem for the Kohen Gadol. Aval Kidesh, but let's say it was just a betrothal, so then maybe Asi Aseh, V'dochelos Aseh, maybe the Aseh of Yevamot will come along, and it'll actually be Dochelos Aseh. Maybe we're specifically looking for cases where there's a double problem of both an Aseh and a Los Aseh for the brother-in-law. But the Gemara doesn't like that, because the Gemara says, V'akula Pirkin Aseh V'los Aseh, but in our entire parak we have cases of Aseh and Los Aseh. V'lo Aseh Aseh V'dochi Los Aseh. And we've said all along that the Aseh of Yibam is not Docha these Los Aseh. So why would it be only over here that you need it to be an Aseh against a Los Aseh and an Aseh? And so the Gemara answers really the reason why we have a case of Nasa over here, even though it seems we could certainly have a case of Kiddush. Mishum de kaboy lemisni seif. The reason is because in the save of the Mishnah we're going to say Kohen Gadol shenasa es almana. There is a case of a Kohen Gadol that marries an almana, and there it's davka nasa. There it has to specifically be where he marries her and he has relations with her, the shavi chalola, because that makes her a chalola, which makes her a problem for her brother-in-law. Avol kiddush, but if it would just be kiddushin shariale, so then it would be permitted. So that's why that case had to be nasa. So therefore tananami reisha nasa. Therefore we have in the reisha also we use the word nasa, but you're right, it could have said kiddush as well. And the Gemara continues, Vadetani mishum seifa. But if you're already teaching this reisha because of the case of the seifa, like we just said, so listen mishum mitziasa. Well, why not say kiddush? Because there's a middle case in the Mishnah, which is a case of kiddush. The middle case in the Mishnah was Kohen Gadol shekiddush es almana. The case was as follows: let's say Kohen Gadol, he betroths the almana, v'yesh lo ach Kohen Hedyot, and he has a brother that's a Kohen Hedyot. That was a case where she was prohibited to her husband, but she was okay with her brother-in-law. So there you have a case of kiddush. So for that reason, you might as well have the reisha be kiddush. And so instead, the Gemara answers, Ela mishum bas buksa. The real reason is because bas buksa, Rashi over here explains bas buksa. Hachi Garcin Ela Mishum Bas Buksa Hadetani Nasa Bereisha de Pirkin Mishum Bas Buksa Kolomar Hashanuya Betzida. The reason is because the case right next to it, that's Bas Buksa, the case that's right adjacent, Cholol Shenasa Ksheri. You have a case over there of a Cholol Shenasa Kshera. So therefore, since over there it used that language, to Kaboy Lemisni Cholol Shenasa Ksheri, we wanted to have a case of a Cholol that marries a Kshera, and over there, Taima de Nasa de Shavya Chalola. When the Cholol marries a Kshera, so it has to be specifically marriage where he has relations and he makes her Chalol. Otherwise, the case doesn't work. Aval Kidei Shariale, but Kiddush would be permitted. So Misham Achi, so for that reason, Katani Nasa, that's why it says Nasa, because right there next to it, it also says Nasa. And the Gemara continues, this is the question that Rashi said the Gemara would ask, Umayirya de Katani Almana. Why in the first case of the Mishnah does it have to be an Almana? She becomes an Almana anyway when her husband dies, so she's already going to be an Almana. So listen to Basula, just say he marries a Basula, then he dies, now she's an Almana, she's a problem to a Kohen Gadol. And we will just take a look at one other Rashi over here. V'akule Pirkin, the Gemara said the entire parak is talking about Asay Docha Lo Saseh, and it's saying that the Asay is not Docha. Asay de Yibam v'Lo Saseh de Isra. It's always talking about cases of Asay of Yibam against some other Lo Saseh. Disra Duramu Adari, which are against each other. And what have we said the whole time? V'Lo Asi Asay de Yibam v'Dachi Lalav de Isra. We never allow the Asay of Yibam to be Docha the Lav. We say no, you don't do the Yibam. Kagon Mamzeres li Yisrael, or Mamzer li Yisraelis. All these cases, a Mamzer and Yisrael, a Mamzeres and Yisrael, a Mamzer and Yisraelis. V'chein Chalol l'Kohen or Chalol l'Kohen. All these cases are Asay and Lo Saseh. My time, and what's the reason that we learned out? The Hanaf Kolon, Perak Beis. We learned this already in Perak Beis. Maybe also Yevim to Hashara. We learned out this halacha that the Asay is not Docha Lo Saseh, and we'll continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Pei Dalid Amud Beis.